You feel everything. Everyone's pain becomes yours. You absorb their moods like a sponge in an ocean. And here's the cruelest part: when you're drowning, no one notices. There are moments when you walk into a room and immediately know something's wrong. The tension in someone's shoulders, the forced lightness in their voice, the way they look away, just a second too long. You feel it all before anyone speaks a word. This gift of yours, this exquisite sensitivity, has become both your superpower and your prison. You recognize others' needs instantly. The colleague who needs reassurance, the friend who's barely holding it together, the family member whose smile doesn't reach their eyes. You see them all. You hold space for them all. You become the container for everyone's unexpressed emotions. But when you're the one falling apart, silence. When you need someone to see past your smile, nothing. When you finally whisper, "I'm not okay," people look at you with confusion, even annoyance, as if you've broken some unspoken contract. Because you're the strong one. You're the one who understands. You're not supposed to need anything. And in that moment, a terrifying question emerges. When no one sees me, do I even exist? This is the empath's double bind. You were born with extraordinary sensitivity, a gift that somewhere along the way became a survival strategy. As a child, you learned to read the room not for connection, but for safety. You decoded your parents' moods to predict storms. You became fluent in the language of unspoken tension. You developed an early warning system for emotional danger. Now, as an adult, you've perfected the art of disappearing into others' needs. You've become so good at holding space that you've forgotten you need space too. The painful irony cuts deep. The more you give, the more invisible you become. The more you understand others, the less they seem capable of understanding you. In the realm of depth psychology, there's a critical distinction between the persona and the self. The persona is the mask we wear to fit into society, the version of ourselves we present to the world. For empaths, this persona becomes the helper, the absorber, the one who always understands. You've built an entire identity around being needed. But beneath that carefully constructed mask, a soul starving for recognition. A heart drowning in unexpressed needs. A self that's been waiting so long to be seen that it's started to wonder if it's real at all. Here's what most people won't tell you. Your empathy isn't the problem. The way you've been taught to use it is. You've been conditioned to give your sensitivity away, to make it useful for everyone except yourself. You've learned to pour from an empty cup and call it compassion. What if everything you've been told about being an empath was incomplete? What if your sensitivity isn't meant to be sacrificed, but sovereignly claimed? What if the loneliness you're experiencing right now isn't a sign that something's wrong with you, but a sacred initiation into something profoundly right? This isn't about becoming less sensitive. It's about becoming sovereign in your sensitivity. It's about learning to feel everything without losing yourself in the process. It's about discovering that the strength you've been giving everyone else has always belonged to you first. Over the next 50 minutes, we'll walk through 7 stages of reclaiming your power when no one validates you. From borrowed worth to intrinsic wholeness. From empathic absorption to sovereign presence. This is a journey from the exhausting question, "Why doesn't anyone see me?" to the liberating truth, "I don't need anyone to see me to know I'm real." Because here's what's waiting on the other side of this initiation, not a hardened heart, but a whole one. Not less feeling, but clearer boundaries. Not isolation, but true connection built on presence, not people-pleasing. You're not learning to care less. You're learning to stop abandoning yourself in the process of caring for others. The transformation begins not when someone finally shows up for you, but when you decide to stop waiting. Before we dive deeper, if this resonates with your soul's journey, Please hit that like button and subscribe for more transformational content. Your support helps this message reach other souls who need to hear it. Let's go back to the beginning. Not to blame anyone, but to understand how your gift became a burden. Because empathy, in its truest form, is supposed to be a bridge between hearts. But for many of us, it started as something else entirely, a defense mechanism. Children who grow up in unpredictable environments develop what psychologists call hypervigilance. When you couldn't predict whether dad would come home angry or mom would fall into one of her silent depressions, you learned to scan for emotional danger. Your nervous system became exquisitely attuned to micro-expressions, tone shifts, energy changes. You learned to feel what was coming before it arrived. If you could sense the storm, maybe you could prevent it. If you could read the room perfectly, maybe you could keep yourself safe. Empathy wasn't originally a generous impulse. It was an emotional early warning system. It was control over chaos. I'm reminded of a woman I spoke with who shared that as a child she could tell which version of her father would walk through the door based on the sound of his footsteps. Heavy and slow meant danger. Quick and light meant safety. By age 7, she'd become a master interpreter of auditory cues, body language silences. I thought everyone could do this, she told me. I didn't realize I'd developed a trauma response disguised as intuition. This is where the work of Carl Jung, Empath, becomes essential to understanding ourselves. In analytical psychology, every archetype carries a shadow, an unconscious counterpart that operates beneath our awareness. The healer archetype, which many empaths identify with, carries a particular shadow, the subtle desire for control disguised as care. When you're fixing someone's pain, you're not just being generous. At an unconscious level, you're also managing your own anxiety. Because if you can make them okay, you don't have to feel the helplessness of not being able to control outcomes. The unconscious bargain becomes clear. If I can heal your wounds, I won't have to face my own. If I can make myself needed, I won't have to fear abandonment. This isn't a moral judgment. It's a psychological reality. We developed these patterns for good reasons. They kept us safe when we were small and powerless. But what protected us then now imprisons us. There's a reason you keep ending up in the same situations. The friend who takes and never gives back. The romantic partner who needs constant emotional labor. The job where you're always the one holding everything together. This isn't bad luck. This is repetition compulsion. Unconsciously, we gravitate toward what feels familiar, even when it hurts us. The pattern of being needed, but not met, of giving, but not receiving, of understanding, but not being understood. It feels like home, not because it's comfortable, but because it's known. Have you noticed you're always the one everyone leans on? And when you finally crack, when you finally say, I can't do this anymore, everyone scatters. They don't know how to hold you because you've never taught them. Every time you said, I'm fine, when you weren't, you trained them not to look deeper. Every time you prioritized their crisis over your own, you sent the message, my needs don't count. This isn't about blaming yourself. It's about seeing the pattern clearly enough to choose differently. When you build your identity around being the helper, the strong one, the understanding one, you create what's called a persona prison. The persona represents a compromise between who you truly are and what society needs you to be. For empaths, this compromise is steep. You've constructed an entire self around being useful. But usefulness isn't the same as worth. Functioning isn't the same as wholeness. And somewhere deep inside, you know this. That's why there are 4 distinct layers of depletion you might recognize. The behavioral layer shows up as chronic yes, saying, over-apologizing difficulty with boundaries. You say sorry when someone bumps into you. You explain yourself when no explanation is needed. You offer help before anyone asks. The emotional layer manifests as absorbing others' anxiety until you can't tell whose feelings are whose. Unexplained shame washes over you. You're terrified of anger, especially your own, because anger requires boundaries, and boundaries feel dangerous. The cognitive layer reveals itself in the story you tell yourself. My worth equals my usefulness. If I'm not helping, I'm worthless. If I set a boundary, I'm selfish. These aren't just thoughts. They're core beliefs that shape your entire reality. But the deepest layer is existential. It's the terrifying question that wakes you at 3 a.m. Who am I if I'm not needed? This is the persona prison. You've built an identity that requires constant external validation to feel real. You've become so skilled at being what others need that you've forgotten who you are beneath the performance. And here's the loneliness paradox. You're surrounded by people who need you, yet profoundly alone. No one asks, how are you really? And when you try to share your own struggles, it feels like burden, not connection. People have grown so accustomed to your strength that your vulnerability feels like betrayal. I think of the therapist who spent her days counseling others through their grief, but had no one to hold her own. Her mother died, and she was back at work within days, listening to clients' problems, offering wisdom, being the steady presence. Who was I supposed to call? She asked. All my relationships were built on me being the strong one. This is the part that hurts most, the part that hurts. You've been there for everyone. You've shown up at 2 a.m. You've canceled your plans. You've held space when it was inconvenient. And now, when you need someone, the silence is deafening. It's not that people are cruel. It's that you've unconsciously trained them. You've trained them to see you as limitless. Every time you showed up exhausted but still smiling, you reinforced the belief that you don't have needs. Every time you minimized your pain to make room for theirs, you taught them that your suffering doesn't require attention. And there's something else happening, something deeper. In psychology, we call it projection. People project onto you what they need: to see the strong one, the wise one, the selfless one. These projections are unconscious. They literally cannot see the real you beneath their need for you to be a certain way. When you finally ask for support, they experience cognitive dissonance. But you're the one who helps. The role you've played has become so convincing that people mistake it for your essence. They've confused your persona with yourself. This moment when no one shows up feels like abandonment, and in a sense it is. But it's also something else, revelation. Your soul in its wisdom has orchestrated this emptiness, not as punishment, but as initiation. Because borrowed worth must be dissolved before authentic selfhood can emerge. The false supports must fall away before you build a foundation that's truly yours. No tree, as the saying goes, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. The loneliness you're standing in isn't the end of your story. It's the threshold of a new chapter. One where you stop performing worth and start embodying it. Where you stop seeking yourself in others' eyes and start finding yourself in your own presence. This sacred collapse, this moment when no one catches you, is teaching you something revolutionary you can catch yourself. What comes next isn't a formula to fix yourself. You're not broken. These 7 stages aren't steps to follow perfectly, but territories to explore layers of integration that bring your empathy home to yourself first. In the tradition of depth psychology, there's a concept called individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, distinct from both collective expectations and unconscious compulsions. For empaths, this journey requires something specific: learning to hold your sensitivity as a sacred gift rather than a service you owe to everyone else. Each stage builds on the previous. Each reveals a new layer of freedom, and each asks you to choose yourself in ways you've been taught are selfish, but are actually essential. Stage 1. Loneliness as rite of passage. There's an ancient motif in mythology called the Night Sea Journey. The hero must descend into darkness, into the belly of the whale, into the underworld itself, to be reborn. For empaths, loneliness is this descent. When there's no one left to lean on, when the world around you grows silent, it's not abandonment. It's initiation. The persona, that mask you've worn for so long, finally gets to rest. And underneath, your authentic needs, your unfiltered emotions, your true desires. This phase asks a question that terrifies and liberates in equal measure. Who am I when no one is watching? The gift of no witnesses is this: you stop performing. You stop curating your pain to make it palatable. You stop editing your needs to make them reasonable. For the first time in possibly your entire life, you get to exist without an audience. I remember a woman who went through a painful divorce. Her home, which had always been full of laughter and friends, became suddenly frighteningly quiet. Her first instinct was to fill the emptiness, dating apps, extra work shifts, anything to avoid the silence. But something in her resisted. Instead, she learned to sit in the quiet. At first, just for a few minutes, then gradually for hours. She cooked for herself slowly and intentionally. She read books she'd been meaning to read for years. She journaled without purpose or audience. She faced the questions she'd been avoiding. Who am I outside of being a wife? What do I want when no one's watching? What does my soul actually need months later? She said something I'll never forget. I realized silence is no longer my enemy. It's where I finally hear myself. This is the sacred solitude practice, not meditation with goals or productivity disguised as self-care. Just 20 to 30 minutes daily of being with self. A slow walk where you feel your own rhythm instead of rushing to meet someone else's pace. Sensory journaling where you write, what do I actually feel right now, without immediately fixing or explaining it. In these moments, something shifts. Silence stops being the enemy and becomes sanctuary. You begin to hear the voice you've been drowning out with everyone else's needs, your own. Your visions become clear only when you look into your own heart. This isn't isolation, it's homecoming. Stage 2. Stop seeking emotional regulation from others. There's a crucial difference between connection and dependency that most of us were never taught. Connection is mutual, reciprocal, life-giving. Dependency is the desperate need for someone else to make you feel okay. For empaths, this distinction gets particularly complex. You've learned to regulate others' emotions so skillfully that you unconsciously hope someone will return the favor. You make others feel safe, validated, understood, and somewhere deep inside, you're waiting for someone to do the same for you. But here's the truth, that no one wants to hear emotional regulation cannot be sustainably outsourced. Often this pattern has roots in childhood. Your emotions were likely invalidated. Don't be so sensitive. You're overreacting. Stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about. You learned that your feelings were too much, too intense, too inconvenient. So you sought others to confirm what you couldn't believe yourself, that your feelings were valid. But seeking permission from others to feel what you feel keeps you trapped. It hands control of your internal state to external circumstances. When someone responds warmly, you feel worthy. When they withdraw, you collapse. This is where self-soothing becomes revolutionary. Not as a cold, disconnected practice, but as self-parenting. Becoming the presence you needed but didn't have. When you're overwhelmed, when that familiar panic rises, when you reach for your phone to text someone, anyone, to make the feeling stop. Pause. Try this 3-step ritual instead. First, name it, out loud if you can. I feel abandoned. I feel worthless. I feel terrified. Don't explain it, justify it, or minimize it. Just name it. Second, soothe it. Place your hand on your chest. Breathe slowly 4 counts, in 6 counts, hold 8 counts out. and speak to yourself the way you'd speak to someone you deeply love. I'm here. I'm listening. You're not alone. Third, meet one small need. Not the need for someone else to validate you, but a need you can meet right now. A glass of water, opening a window, stretching your body, lying down for 5 minutes without apology. I think of the woman who would spiral into panic whenever her boyfriend didn't reply to texts. She'd check her phone dozens times, construct elaborate narratives about what his silence meant, feel herself fragmenting. After months of therapeutic work, she discovered the fear wasn't really about him. It was about the childhood message that her emotions didn't matter unless someone else confirmed they did. She started a practice. When the panic arose, she'd text herself instead. What do I need right now from me? After 6 months, she said, I still love connection, but I'm no longer desperate for it. I can hold myself. This is emotional independence. Not coldness, not disconnection, but the foundation for genuine intimacy. Because only whole people can truly meet each other. When you're not clinging to someone to regulate your nervous system, you're free to love them without losing yourself. Stage 3. Stop complaining. Reclaim your power. Here's an uncomfortable truth. Every time you complain, you reinforce the belief that you're powerless. Complaint is how the ego keeps you anchored in the victim position, the place where you get to be right about how unfair everything is, but never have to change. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it directs your life, and you call it fate. Every complaint is the unconscious running the show, turning you into a victim of circumstance. But when you catch yourself complaining, when you look beneath the emotion fueling it, you step back into consciousness. You reclaim agency. For empaths, complaint often has a specific flavor. You rarely complain directly about your own pain. Instead, it comes out sideways. I'm tired of people not appreciating me. No one understands? I do so much and get nothing back. These complaints feel justified. And maybe they are. But they're also prisons. Every time you rehearse the story of how others have failed you, you lose the energy needed to change your situation. Complaint is a clever form of delayed action. It makes you feel like you're doing something while keeping you exactly where you are. The shift isn't from complaint to toxic positivity. It's from complaint to micro-action. From why me to what can I do with this? Try this tool, the event control 15-minute matrix. When something happens that triggers resentment or helplessness, write it down. Name the event clearly. Then ask, what about this situation can I actually control? Often it's not much. You can't control others' choices, responses, appreciation. But you can control your boundaries, your responses, your next small step. Then commit to one 15-minute action within 24 hours. Not solving the whole problem, just moving differently in some small way. I worked with a woman who managed a team and spent months complaining that no one helped, that she carried everything, that her efforts went unnoticed. One day she wrote down, "What boundary can I set today?" Her answer was simple. I'll respond to non-urgent requests within 24 hours, not 24 minutes. That boundary felt terrifying to implement. But she did it. And something remarkable happened. Her team adjusted. People stopped expecting instant responses. Some even started solving problems themselves. Her resentment began to dissolve, not because others changed, but because she did. There's a metaphor I return to often. Imagine a stone at the bottom of a river. The current is strong. It grinds and crashes and carries the stone along. The stone could spend all its energy cursing the current, but the current will flow regardless. What transforms the stone isn't the absence of friction, but the way it surrenders to the polishing. Over time, the very force that seemed destructive makes the stone smooth and luminous. Life is that river. It doesn't pause because you complain. But if you endure the flow instead of cursing it, you emerge stronger, clearer, more beautiful than before. Complaining feeds what's called the victim ego, the part of you that wants someone else to take responsibility for your pain. And as long as you're a victim, you're exempt from the discomfort of change. But you're also exempt from power. Every time you stop complaining and take action, any action, however small, you reclaim energy lost to the unconscious. You rise not because someone pushes you, but because you choose not to stay in the dark. Stage 4. Become your own source of validation. After you've stopped complaining and begun to act, a deeper test emerges. You're standing up. You're working hard. You're giving your best. And no one notices. No one praises you. No one acknowledges the effort. This is where most people give up. Not because they fear the work itself, but because they fear invisibility, the silence of being unseen. But this silence is the universe's final test. Can you keep going without the spotlight? Can you validate your own worth when no one else does? The most terrifying thing, as it's been said, is to accept oneself completely. Because when you truly validate yourself, you no longer hide behind others' opinions. You don't need compliments to know you're on the right path. You don't need witnesses to your worth. You've become your own witness. There's a Greek myth about Cassandra, a woman gifted with prophecy but cursed so that no one would believe her. She saw the truth warned of disasters before they came, but everyone turned away, calling her mad. Yet even in isolation, Cassandra didn't go silent. She kept speaking, stayed loyal to what she saw. At a symbolic level, her story mirrors every strong soul who continues to honor their truth, even when the world refuses to see them. Sometimes being believed isn't as important as staying true to yourself. I knew a woman who, after years of dedication to her work, was often the last one in the office. Yet when awards came, her boss praised someone else. "I felt invisible," she said. One day she decided to stop working to be seen and start working to see herself. Every time she finished a project, she wrote down what she'd done well. Not for anyone else, just for her. She rewarded herself with small unconditional gifts, a quiet afternoon, a favorite coffee, a book she'd been wanting. "I realized," she told me, "that external validation lasts for minutes. Self-recognition stays for days." This is the movement from the dependent ego to the self, the mature center of consciousness. Those who live from this place act not for praise, but because it's an expression of who they are. Their value doesn't come from applause. It comes from the frequency of inner truth. When you know your own darkness, you're no longer controlled by others' projections. When you've seen both your weakness and your strength, you stop needing the world to prove anything to you. You're no longer hostage to the fear of not being enough because you know you are enough simply because you exist. Self-validation isn't arrogance. It's the deepest form of self-respect. It's knowing you're still learning, still imperfect, yet holding yourself with both hands, light and shadow alike. Mistakes don't reduce your worth. They make your path more real. Think of steel being forged. Metal hardens only when exposed to fire. The soul is the same. Silence, neglect, and lack of recognition are flames that strengthen your core. When no one else validates you, you're forced to look inward. And in that gaze, you discover something extraordinary. You're far stronger than you thought. And when you truly embrace that, something miraculous happens. You begin to glow from within. Others may not say a word, but they feel your presence. Steady, calm, grounded. Not because you're trying to shine, but because you no longer need to prove anything. Every applause fades. Every gaze eventually turns away. But your own gaze, if it's warm and honest, becomes a flame that never dies. And that is the secret of those who rise, even when no one stands beside them. Stage 5. Rise quickly from failure. You've learned to stand in solitude. You've practiced self-soothing, you've stopped complaining and started validating yourself. And yet you still fall. Life still knocks you down. For empaths, failure carries particular weight. You fear it intensely because failure means disappointing others, which means losing worth, which means abandonment. So you avoid risks, stay small, or when you do fail, you collapse completely. But failure in its truest sense isn't about loss, it's about illumination. Mistakes are, after all, the foundations of truth. Every time you stumble, your shadow reappears not to punish you, but to show you the parts of yourself still waiting to be integrated. Your hidden arrogance, your need for control, your unacknowledged fear. And here's the paradox: only when no one catches you do you learn to walk with your own strength. I remember a woman who ran a small business. After years of effort, her co-founder betrayed her, took clients, destroyed trust. She lost nearly everything. For months, she lived in guilt and shame, replaying every decision, wondering what she'd missed. One day, her therapist asked a simple question: "If this isn't an ending but a lesson, what is it teaching you?" She sat in silence. Then quietly, "Maybe I never truly listened to my intuition. I knew something was off, but I ignored it because I didn't want to seem judgmental or untrusting." From that moment, she began journaling daily, not to complain, but to document what she was learning from the pain. A year later, she reopened her company. Smaller, steadier, built on clearer boundaries. "I'm no longer afraid to fall," she said. "Every fall makes me more honest with myself." This is the 3M framework for rising from failure. First, the misstep, what actually happened, just facts, no story. Second, the meaning. What does this reveal about my edges, my patterns, my unhealed places? Third, the micro step 1. Small action within 24 hours to move differently. From a neuroscience perspective, when you fail, your brain activates the anterior cingulate cortex, processing the gap between expectation and reality. If you respond with fear or self-blame, cortisol floods your system and freezes you. But when you take action, even tiny action, your prefrontal cortex engages, releasing dopamine, the chemical of progress and hope. Regret paralyzes. Action heals. There's an ancient symbol of the phoenix, the mythical bird that regenerates by burning itself. Whenever it grows old, it dives into flames, sheds its ashes, and rises again brighter, freer. Humans work the same way. When you dare to rise from your own ashes, you see that what burned away wasn't you. It was just the shell that had finished its purpose. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. When we face failure without judgment, wounds cease to be enemies and become teachers. In pain, awareness is born. And only when we touch our wounds can we truly touch our humanity. Rock bottom is never the end. It's the ground you push off from. Strong souls aren't born from comfort. They're forged in collapse. Just as metal becomes a sword only after enduring heat, humans find their true strength when they face failure and refuse to retreat. Falling doesn't make you weak. Staying down does. Stage 6. Act without relying on inspiration. After learning to rise from falls, a subtler lesson awaits acting even when you don't feel ready. Because if solitude forged your strength, discipline will make you shine. Will is the energy capable of reorganizing the entire psyche. It's not just the force to do something, but the power to transcend fleeting emotion in service of lasting meaning. For empaths, this is particularly challenging. Your feelings fluctuate wildly because you absorb everyone else's energy. If you act only when inspired, when you feel motivated, when everything aligns, you'll rarely act at all. You'll have a life full of beginnings, but empty of mastery. Inspiration is wind, it comes and goes. But will is direction. It keeps the ship moving even when the wind dies. Most people lose their life force waiting for inspiration instead of cultivating will. Freedom of will, paradoxically, is the ability to do gladly that which you must do. Real freedom isn't doing what you like. It's gladly doing what's necessary. I think of Angela Duckworth's research on grit. She discovered that extraordinary achievers aren't the most talented. They're the ones who act when enthusiasm fades. They're the ones who show up especially when no one is cheering. A friend of mine, a single mother working 2 jobs, once told me she woke at 5 a.m. every day. Cooking, working, surviving. There came a time when she was utterly drained. "I've lost all passion," she admitted. But when her son asked, "Mom, what happened to your dream?" something shifted. That night she decided to start again, not for inspiration, but for responsibility to herself. She began small, waking 15 minutes earlier to read, writing 3 daily goals, saving every spare dollar. Some days she was exhausted, but she kept going. "I stopped waiting for motivation," she said. "I just needed will. Because my son needs to see his mother not give up." A year later, she opened a small bakery. No one helped, no one encouraged, but she kept walking. She learned that willpower isn't a feeling. It's a decision to continue even when your heart feels heavy. This is where personal development meets practical reality. Inspiration doesn't create will. Will creates inspiration. When you begin without feeling ready, inspiration follows as a reward for perseverance. Try the 90-20 discipline rule. When you don't want to start, commit to just 90 seconds. Often inertia breaks and you'll continue. On hard days, commit to 20 minutes of aligned action. 20 minutes beats 0. Establish 3 non-negotiables, even on terrible days. Body 10 minutes of movement or breath work. Mind 5 minutes of reading or reflection. Work 15 minutes on your most important task. These aren't goals. They're acts of self-fidelity. Strong-willed people aren't emotionless. They simply don't let emotion control them. They still fear, doubt, tire. But they act for something greater, for values, for commitments, for integrity. Each time they do what's right instead of what's easy, they strengthen the bridge between consciousness and soul, between the small ego and the mature self. One day you'll realize your most defining progress didn't happen in moments of excitement. It happened in moments of resistance when you were alone with no reminders or encouragement. Those moments shape you not because they're easy, but because you refuse to let mood or loneliness dictate your direction. Stage 7. Release the need to be understood. After all this work, rising, acting, validating yourself, one truth remains. No one will ever fully understand you. And learning to be okay with that is the final liberation. This is where the concepts of Carl Jung empath work converge into something transcendent. Your visions become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams? Who looks inside awakes? You've spent your life trying to be understood, making yourself smaller or bigger, simpler or more complex depending on who you were talking to. Explaining yourself, justifying yourself, hoping that if you could just find the right words, someone would finally see you. But here's what depth psychology reveals. People see you through the lens of their own wounds and needs. Even those who love you see a version filtered by their own consciousness. They project onto you what they need to see, the strong one, the wise one, the safe one. This isn't malicious. It's developmental reality. Most people are still learning to understand themselves. They don't have the capacity to understand you at your full depth. As an empath, you understand others so deeply, so instinctively, that you long for that same depth of understanding in return. But it rarely comes. And waiting for it keeps you trapped in performance, trying to make yourself legible to people who might never have the tools to read you. The liberation comes when you stop needing to be understood and start allowing yourself to simply be. When you stop over-explaining, over-justifying, contorting yourself to fit into someone else's capacity to see. I remember a young painter who spent years creating art for trends and sales. She fell into creative exhaustion, feeling like a fraud. One day she rented a small house by a lake and cut off all communication for a month. She painted again, not to show, not to sell, but to listen to what her soul wanted to say. When she returned, her art had changed. Raw, alive, full of soul. A gallery in Berlin saw her work by chance and invited her to exhibit. She said something profound. When I stopped trying to be seen, people began to truly see me. This is the paradox. When you stop seeking outwardly, you become a center of inward gravity. Creative energy, love, wisdom, and they don't come from being understood. They come from accepting yourself, even the parts no one else understands. Think of a lighthouse in the night sea. It doesn't shout to be seen. It doesn't move to seek attention. It simply stands shining. And by doing so, it guides those who are lost. Humans are the same. When you stand in your own light without needing recognition, your presence itself becomes guidance for others. The curious paradox, as Carl Rogers observed, is that when you accept yourself just as you are, then you can change. No one will ever fully understand you. But that doesn't mean you can't be loved. Real love doesn't require full understanding. It requires full acceptance. When you learn to accept yourself, your complexity, depth, contradictions, you radiate an energy that makes others feel safe near you. Strangely, the moment you stop seeking understanding, you begin to be understood. Not through words, but through presence. If life has exhausted you with the need to be understood, rest. Sit in silence. Place your hand over your heart. Listen. That voice inside, faint but steady, knows the way. It knows where to go, what to release, how to begin again. And then you'll realize no one needs to complete you because you were never incomplete. Everything you've searched for, love, peace, understanding, are simply different faces of one thing, coming home to yourself. Most empaths were taught that boundaries equal selfishness. How can you say no when they need you? The result, porous boundaries, chronic depletion, resentment that has no healthy outlet. In-depth psychology, integrating the animus and anima, the inner masculine and feminine, creates what we might call an inner spine. The ability to love without dissolving, to stay open without losing yourself. Here's the critical distinction. Walls are built from anger and meant to punish. Boundaries are built from clarity and meant to protect. A wall says, I won't help you because you never helped me. A boundary says, I understand your need, and here's what I can offer within my capacity. Try the 72-hour non-reactive ritual. When someone makes a request that triggers anxiety or resentment, don't respond immediately unless it's an actual emergency. Sit with it for 24 to 72 hours. Ask yourself, what do I actually have capacity for? What do I want to offer? Not what do I feel obligated to offer? Then respond clearly, kindly, firmly. I care about this, and I need to check my capacity before committing. I'm available Tuesday from 2 to 3 for this conversation. That's beyond what I can hold right now. These scripts feel uncomfortable at first. You'll worry you're being cold or unkind. But watch what happens. People who respect you will adjust. Those who don't will reveal themselves. I worked with a manager who kept an open-door policy that became all-day counseling sessions. Her team was dependent. She was burned out. She implemented office hours for non-urgent issues and coached her team to problem-solve first, then consult. Productivity increased. Autonomy increased. Her resentment dissolved. Watch for signs your boundaries are eroding. Physical exhaustion, mysterious illness, chronic tension. Emotional vague anger, desire to withdraw completely. Behavioral silent punishment. Passive aggression. Existential, why do I even bother? These aren't signs you're failing. They're signs you need to return to yourself. Integration isn't a one-time event. It's a daily practice of returning home to yourself before you extend outward. In the morning, before checking your phone, before anyone else's needs, 5 deep belly breaths. 3 intentions for the day. Today, I will honor my pace. Speak one truth. Rest without guilt. Then tackle one hard task first, before your empathic energy gets pulled outward. At midday, empaths accumulate what I call energetic noise, others' emotions, expectations, projections. Step outside for 5 minutes. Feel the temperature. Breathe fresh air. Wash your hands or face with intention. I release what isn't mine. Rate your energy from 0 to 10. Adjust your afternoon rhythm accordingly. In the evening, practice self-recognition. Write down 3 things you completed today, including rest. 1 thing you're grateful to yourself for. 1 thing you're ready to release. 1 micro step for tomorrow, a single small aligned action. Weekly, ask yourself 5 reflection questions. Was I honest with myself this week? What did I avoid that I need to face? What am I ready to release? Was I kind to myself when I struggled? Did I take 1 action without needing praise? These practices aren't about productivity or optimization. They're about staying connected to yourself so you don't lose yourself in others. When you become sovereign, relationships change. Some people won't like it. They preferred your boundaryless giving. Others will respect you more deeply. This sorting is necessary and healthy. There are 3 types of relationships. Mutual relationships, where both people give and receive, where boundaries are honored. One-directional relationships, where you give and they take, or vice versa. And transactional relationships, where connection is based on usefulness, not genuine being. This isn't about judgment. It's about discernment, seeing clearly without condemnation. You can love someone and choose not to give them your energy. Boundaries are love for yourself and for them, because they need to learn sovereignty too. You don't need to explain your entire journey. Simple truth works. I'm learning to honor my capacity better. Let your actions speak. Consistent boundaries. Calm no's. Less overfunctioning. Those who respect you will adjust. Those who don't will reveal themselves. And here's the gift you give others when you stop overfunctioning space to grow. When you stop absorbing their emotions, you invite them to regulate themselves. When you stop being their savior, you empower them to save themselves. This is true compassion, not enabling, but empowering. I knew a daughter who spent decades managing her mother's chronic chaos. She'd drop everything when her mother called in crisis. Finally, she set a boundary. I love you. I'll listen for 20 minutes. I won't fix it. Her mother was angry at first, then surprisingly started therapy on her own. The daughter told me, I thought my help was love. It was actually fear she'd fall apart without me. When I stopped carrying her, she learned to walk. You're not becoming less empathic. You're becoming sovereignly empathic. You still feel deeply, but you don't absorb indiscriminately. You still care, but you don't carry what isn't yours. You still give, but from overflow, not emptiness. The integrated empath feels others' pain and maintains a separate self, offers support and honors their own limits, stays open and protects their energy, loves deeply and requires nothing in return. This is individuation for empaths, becoming whole, not perfect. The energy shift is palpable. Before your energy scattered to everyone else's needs, Now it's centered in self-shared from surplus. Before, validation came from being needed. Now it comes from being aligned. What you no longer tolerate relationships that require you to abandon yourself. Jobs that demand boundaryless availability. Situations where your no isn't respected. Connections that feel like obligation, not choice. What you now attract: people who respect boundaries. Reciprocal relationships. Work that honors your humanity. Space to rest without guilt. This isn't magic, it's energetics. When you stop tolerating what depletes you, you create space for what nourishes you. Throughout this exploration of personal development, we return to one essential truth: worth is intrinsic, not earned. Being precedes doing. You matter because you exist, not because of what you offer others. When the world is silent, you no longer collapse. You listen inward. That silence isn't absence, it's sanctuary. In that space, your soul speaks clearest, and you realize you were never alone. You were just too busy trying to be seen to see yourself. You are the lighthouse now. Not moving, not chasing, not proving, simply standing in your truth, shining your light. Those who need your frequency will find you. Those who don't weren't your people anyway. And after all the no's, after all the boundaries, one truth emerges. You're finally saying yes to yourself. Yes to your pace, your needs, your truth. Yes to rest without earning it. Yes to being human, imperfect, still worthy. This understanding of Carl Jung empath principles brings us full circle. We are not what happened to us. We are what we choose to become. Your empathy was shaped by survival, but now it's guided by self. You were trained to lose yourself in others. Now you're training to find yourself through yourself. The existential question was, when no one recognizes me, do I matter? The answer: you matter because you exist. Recognition is bonus, not requirement. Take 30 days. Choose one morning ritual, one micro-action, one evening practice. Do them not perfectly, but consistently enough. After 30 days, ask yourself 3 questions. How have I treated myself with more kindness? Which boundary has become clearer? What has started to flow again? Measure your progress, not by external validation, but by internal shifts. Physical sleep quality, energy level, body ease. Behavioral number of kind no's, delayed reactions instead of impulse yeses. Relational, more direct conversations, fewer people-pleasing spirals. Inner, less self-criticism, more self-compassion. Existential time spent in aligned work, not just obligated work. This journey isn't about getting ahead of others. It's about getting aligned with yourself. And when you're aligned, you don't need to get ahead. You're already home. Here's the empath's manifesto. Speak it when you need to remember. I don't borrow worth from applause. I take responsibility for today's smallest act. I choose mature boundaries, not punitive ones. I recognize my own effort every day. I allow others not to understand me, so I may understand myself more deeply. Your visions become clear only when you can look into your own heart. You've been looking outside your whole life. Now finally you're looking in. And what you find there is enough. More than enough. It's everything. You were never meant to carry the world. You were meant to illuminate it. And you can only do that when you found your own light first. If this resonated with something deep in your soul, leave one word in the comments, Sovereign. Let it be your declaration that you're no longer waiting for someone to save you. You're becoming your own source of light. And if you know an empath who's been giving until there's nothing left, share this with them. Sometimes we need permission to come home to ourselves. Subscribe for more journeys into the depths of becoming whole. Because the world needs empaths who are sovereign, not depleted. Strong, not sacrificial. Here, not lost in everyone else's needs. The transformation isn't complete when someone finally sees you. It's complete when you realize you no longer need them to.